Captains, you know you want to see more videos like these. How about more on-site coverage of special events and visits to Cryptic Studios? Then visit patreon.com/Priority1 and find out how you can be a monthly supporter of the show. Because without your ongoing support, none of this would be possible.
Command codes verified.
Joining us for our very special coverage of the 5th anniversary event for Star Trek Online is systems designer Jeremy Borticus Randall. Jeremy, thank you for joining us again here on Priority One Podcast.
Thank you for having me again here on Priority One.
It's exciting. We're going to be going through some amazing new features that you've had a significant hand in, so we're looking forward to seeing them in action.
Yes, I'm looking forward to showing them off.
A big thanks to Phil Farktoid for helping us set up all the tech for this, right?
Yes. Wouldn't have made it without him.
Well, first off, congratulations on 5 years. I mean, that's an amazing accolade.
Yeah, and you know, we just got done celebrating here internally. It's great. Few MMOs make it to 5 years, so it's great to be doing this well when we roll around to our 5th anniversary.
That's a fact. It really hit me when you guys put out the infographic. I had been thinking, you know, it's about anniversary time, but 5 years, it's the 5-year mission, it's half a decade, it's big stuff.
Yep, now we begin our second 5-year mission, right?
Exactly. And if you make it past 7th, you've got all the series beat.
Yeah. So why don't we take a moment...
Don't say if.
We will.
When?
So why don't we take a moment and peek a little behind the curtain. What new features in STO are your baby?
Well, that would have to be the specializations at this point in time. I also have a heavy hand in the lockboxes, but I think everybody wants to hear more about the specializations than the lockboxes.
Absolutely. I think people are really clamoring to get their hands on the new bridge officer abilities, the powers, and of course the new tree. And on top of that...
with the 5th anniversary, it's the command officer for each.
So why don't we talk a little bit about the command officer and those abilities. Let's talk about its genesis. Players might recall you talking about the James Bond-esque influence with the intelligence series of powers and specializations. Let's talk about command a bit.
Sure. Command really sprung about from... There's a number of TNG episodes primarily where we see officers from the crew undergo command training. The most obvious example of this was one episode where Deanna Troi goes through command training and becomes that solidifies her part in the chain of command on the ship. There are a couple other examples of this throughout all of the series, but that's really what we wanted to latch onto and to reflect in these power sets, both in the bridge officers and in the specialization for captains, is that notion of finally being trained and ready to shoulder that responsibility of being in charge of your peers and your subordinates, and shouldering that responsibility.
So these powers are I've noticed, are very team-oriented and buffing the team.
Yes, most of them at least have a team component, if not being strictly only useful in a team. Some of them actually require having an ally nearby before you can even activate them at all.
Now, you mentioned Troy. Is there going to be a power to crash a ship on a planet surface?
We tried it, but the closest we could get was actually summoning a planet to crash into, and it was a little heavy, intensive on the server.
Well, we don't want that right now.
No, we don't want that.
Now, actually, before we get into that, there is some nitty-gritty regarding the new bridge officer, the new UI, and their abilities. Something that you posted on the forums that players might be experiencing. So before we start going into the powers, I'd like to talk a little bit about this script that was run with Thursday's patch. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and what players can expect, and in case it got caught by surprise?
Sure, I can talk a little bit about it, but I'm not really the programmers responsible for it, so I apologize if I get this a little wrong. What basically it came down to was we realized with the release of the Bridge Officer Training revamp that some powers that were originally available only on very rare bridge officers would now become unavailable, at least temporarily. We're looking into a bigger long-term solution, but as of the rollout of this system, they would become unavailable. And we wanted to, so we instituted a script that would allow players to have those original powers restored to them. In addition to, the plan was in addition to the powers that you had manually given them.
Now, this is for handcrafted, specifically for handcrafted bridge officers, correct? So, for instance, if I, you know, with my Android, if I had trained a power, when I logged in on Thursday, the original power that came with the Android might have been slotted. And in some cases, I mean, I know I panicked. I was like, oh my God, it reverted back to the original set of powers that the BOF had when I purchased it. But then I had, when I was digging into the UI, and fortunately the members of the Priority 1 fleet were there to kind of go, no. Go into the UI and then slot the power. It's still there. You now have 2 powers that you have learned and your BOF has learned from the get-go. Right,
that's the plan. You should have both the power that you had manually given that officer and the one that it originally came with. Now, there have been reports of players who had their BOFs reverted and didn't maintain the powers that they had manually given them. We're still investigating that. We're not certain how to reproduce it internally. It's a matter under investigation still at this point in time. Okay. But if you log in and you see the wrong powers on your bars, don't panic. First, head to your BOF skill window and see if you can manually select the powers that you had already trained them in.
Yeah, that's all I had to do. I think it affected 2, maybe 3 of my BOFs.
All right, so let's jump right in, shall we? Why don't we talk about the bridge officer powers and their abilities, and maybe we can get a demonstration.
Yes, I'm hoping this demonstration works out. So I'm broadcasting this on Twitch, so the guys at Priority 1 can publish this later. And I'm just going to go through each of the command powers that I have slotted in my trays here and give a little bit of description of what they do and how to use them, how they might be useful, all of that.
And lots of glamour shots of the new Samsar cruiser.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is the new Kabali Samsar cruiser, which is a command cruiser. You won't be able to slot all of these powers at the same time on it, but they would be available if you trained them up.
It's a nice ship. Really good angles.
Beautiful colors.
Okay, so we'll get started here. The first on the list is the rally point marker. Now what this does is it creates a point that you and your allies can move to have your debuffs removed and your hull and your shields restored. Now the debuff removal and the instant shield restore and the large instant hull restore are only once per 30 seconds, but if you remain within the rally point, you also have a small hull restored over time. So I'll show you what this looks like. It's a very large field, and it should be very easy for you and your teammates nearby to notice where it's at and fly in for some nice hull restoration and debuff removal. This can also be plopped right down next to somebody that might be suffering from a debuff, and it will cleanse them. It's very useful in a number of different situations. And even though it looks like a flat hex, it's actually a sphere. So if you're up above it, you'll still get the benefits.
That actually looks larger than the Undine Rep ability that gives you the biomolecular shield.
I believe it is, by about 1/2 kilometer, I believe, in every direction.
Nice.
But that's one of the reasons that we decided to make the effects... Whoa, I don't know what just happened with my camera. To make the effects just flat instead of a sphere. Sphere looked like it took up too much space, too noisy.
Are there particular categories of debuffs that it does or doesn't work on, or is it just sweeping?
This particular power will remove anything that's flagged as a debuff. Now that doesn't necessarily mean hazards that are placed. Like if you're caught in an eject warp plasma and somebody puts this down next to you, chances are it's not going to free you. But it should catch nearly every form of debuff in the game. So next up on the power list is the ambush point marker. Now this can only be used outside of combat, so this power is one that will probably be among the more difficult to use for players. But it can only be used outside of combat and when you're not cloaked. And what it does is it lays down a marker. And anyone within this field near the marker will receive a high stealth buff. Foes will not see the marker. All they will see is this decoy damaged ship. And if they fly near it, I will show you, after it expires, I'll put one down next to one of these test dummies and I'll show you the effects of what happens. It basically triggers an ambush.
So let's talk a little bit about its use within the gameplay. So when would a player want to go ahead and trigger a power like this?
Anytime you're in combat or just about to engage in combat, you can lay this down the second before combat begins. That's a great time to lay it down. It'll give you a few more seconds of cloak to get into position. And if you can ever draw a foe to a position where you're at, or you know that they are going to patrol towards a certain location, laying down one of these ambush markers could potentially give you an edge. So if you place this down near an enemy or get an enemy to move into the area, shortly after the ambush is triggered, 2 ambusher craft will come into view, and they'll start attacking the nearest foe, as well as granting you a rather substantial ambush buff of your own. The ambush bonus, even only at rank 1, is a 20%. I believe this ramps up 30 and 40% at higher ranks. And this ambush is for anyone who was within the marker's area of effect before it was triggered.
Wow, nice.
The ambushers last a good long time, and then they fly away.
I can see that working really well in some of the Borg STFs. Actually, in any of the STFs, right? Because
Kittimer especially, you could lay one of these down near the vortex that the probes fly towards. As long as you can get yourself out of combat. Also, I believe in the Undine Assault, where you're flying down the lanes. If you can clear a lane and more foes are coming down it, they could trigger it. Yeah, a number of uses, but as I said before, might be difficult to use. Hopefully the payoff is worth it.
And the timer doesn't start on it, the countdown, the cooldown doesn't start on it until it's either attacked or destroyed or it's used.
Right, or you fly more than 20k away from it. It'll despawn itself and trigger the cooldown at that point.
Okay. All right, that's certainly helpful.
So the next power to show off is another marker. This one is called Phalanx Formation. This will summon a series of Phalanx markers, which look like giant rings in space. And as you and your allies fly through each one, the first, second, and third ring give progressively larger buffs as you pass through them. So even though this power doesn't actually put you in a Phalanx Formation or anything like that, the name is meant to imply its best use case scenario. So trigger it, and a ring will form. The timing and the placement of these rings is based on the speed and the turn rate of the ship that is using them. Since command powers will mostly be on command ships, cruisers type ships, then they will most likely be pretty close to one another. So more agile ships are more likely to be able to fly through these quicker. But if they stay in formation with you, like the name says, then they will guaranteed get all 3 buffs.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
So the system will know. The system will know when your allies are in formation with you doing it.
Just by them passing through the rings.
Probably similar tech to flying through the rings on Risa, or in the zones where you warp around the sun.
That was in Night of the Comet, too.
Yeah, or the new racetrack.
All pretty similar.
I like it.
Under the hood. You should see this used on a fast ship, though. The rings get really spread out. It's interesting to see. Okay, next up is one of my favorites, because explosions. Call emergency artillery. We'll summon 3 separate artillery vessels, which will warp in near your position and then fly in formation directly towards the foe that you have targeted. And each one of them has an AoE sphere around it, basically, of doing periodic kinetic damage. If you can manage to catch a foe in all 3, then it's actually 3 times the damage that is shown on the tooltip. So it can get pretty devastating. And I will show you what it looks like. And as you notice, the ship there took multiple hits from the vessels before they warped out. Even the one next to it was hit by a couple of the explosions. The tricky part of using this power is that it will fly between you and the foe that you have targeted, so if you can catch multiple foes in that line, kind of a skill shot sort of thing, you can damage multiple opponents with one cast.
Like pool.
Yeah,
kind of.
Like pool? No.
They're really good pool players.
Oh, wow.
It's the USS Michael Bay.
Now, I'm sorry, can you explain to me again about the stacking bonus and how that plays into effect with this power?
The emergency artillery?
Yeah.
It's just multiple ships. Each of the 3 ships that you summon has its own sphere of damage.
Okay.
So if you can manage to get one ship in the sphere of all 3 ships, then all 3 will deal their damage.
Okay, I see. Okay, I understand now.
This also works extremely well with larger targets, like board gates, or that big dreadnought at the end of Corfez.
Awesome, that looks cool. I like the animations. These animations for these are pretty nice.
Up next is a pretty low-key one, but could be extremely handy. It's called Needs of the Many. Now what this power does is it drops your own shield facings, your shield capacity to 0. You can immediately heal yourself back if you have the ability to do so, but your shields will be dropped to 0, not offline, just 0 capacity. Now, the benefit that you get for doing that is that everybody on your team will gain an amount of temporary hit points. And the temporary hit points will scale based on the amount of shields you sacrificed in their favor. So if you sacrifice 100% of your shields, you get a huge bonus to the amount of temporary hit points your teammates receive.
Yeah, that one looked really juicy. A lot of potential in that. And it is based on the percentage, not on the value of your shields?
Correct.
Sorry, Cookie.
So like if you die, let's say if you die and you respawn and you're kind of far away from the fight, can you activate that and help your teammates since you're not getting shot at?
There is a max limit, but I believe it's pretty generous, like 30, 40k.
Okay. And how long does that last?
The shields drop to 0 for yourself is instant, and there's no ongoing effect. The temporary hit points for your allies is, I believe, 15 seconds.
Okay, cool.
Or until depleted by incoming damage. 20 seconds, sorry. But you can even see, as my shields slowly come back, my capacity increases. The tooltip is updating on the fly with the amount of temporary hit points that my teammates will receive.
Very neat.
Now, when your shields go down to 0, can you trigger something like Science Team and expedite your? Okay.
Yes. Really, it incentivizes being prepared for a situation like that. Also knowing when to use it. You wouldn't want to drop your own shields to 0 if you're about to get hit with a Thaleron blast or something.
Right.
So a certain amount of situational awareness is necessary. Now the next one I'm going to show off is reroute power from life support.
Here we go.
Now this is a power which will boost, its primary use is to boost your own power levels. And it does this over time. It also will repair all disabled subsystems on an ongoing basis. As long as you keep this power toggled on, you're basically immune to subsystem disables from any source. But it comes with a downside. As it might imply from the name, you are sacrificing power from your life support systems. So as you keep the power toggled on, your crew will gradually become disabled, reducing your hull repair rate, and your power recharge times will gradually increase. I'll reflect this in here by activating attack pattern alpha, which usually only has a, I think, 2-minute cooldown, and now, because I have reroute power, it's up to a 3-minute cooldown, and it keeps increasing. After the toggle wears off, you can see my cooldowns jump down. After the debuff wears off. It's temporary.
That's very interesting.
So it requires a bit of tactical thought. This cooldown penalty affects pretty much everything on your ship, including your weapons, your beams and torpedoes. So the primary purpose of this power would usually probably be to keep your subsystems online, as well as pumping extra power to them if you might need that for any reason.
Yeah, the fact that that's a continuous effect is pretty strong.
But you can also turn it off at any time. If you feel like the toggle is going on too long and the penalties are getting out of hand, you can just click it off and it stops right then and there.
Oh, and I see the recharge penalty. It says just lingers for 10 seconds.
Yes. Okay, so the next two powers are both in a subset that we were talking about when designing them, that they would mark the targets. So that is actually the primary focus of this, is to encourage team play, encourage coordination. But the effects of each of these two powers are different. So it's up to you which one you want to use, but both of them are meant to serve that primary purpose of team coordination and rewarding you for coordination. So the first of these is Overwhelm Emitters. This, when used, will place a mark on the target, and any friendly target that fires on them, including yourself, will drain additional shields with every shot that you make against that marked target, and restore a small portion of your own shields. The other in the set of marking targets is called Concentrate Firepower. And just as the other one was focused on energy weapons and how they do extra shield and restore shields, this one focuses primarily on kinetics. So once a target is marked with this, anytime you fire on them, you have a chance of being granted a free high yield 1. Anybody that fires on that target can potentially get this free high yield mode for as long as concentrate firepower remains in effect.
These are both nice toys for torpedo builds and drain builds, which are probably two of the more popular alternative to just all-out sort of beam fire at will. I guess flavor of the month isn't really fair because people have been doing them for a while, but
It's my flavor of my month.
But yeah, I mean,
beams.
but for a player, it's who's not using torpedoes. Unfortunately, they will not see that benefit.
well, you could still market for other torpedo users in your group, I suppose.
You could mark it for anyone.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, I mean, it's meant to be a coordination tool. Now, I forgot to mention that also anytime that a marked target with concentrate firepower, any torpedo that hits them will deal additional kinetic damage that bleeds through shields.
I've been wanting to make a torpedo boat for a while.
So even without the high yield, you still do extra damage.
You know, I've been subscribing to the school of DPS thought that to get the max out, you don't want to waste a slot on the torpedoes. But I think this is a nice incentive to kind of revisit that again.
But as we've said with previous power sets, we're okay if every power that we make is not good for every build. So if concentrate firepower just doesn't work for you, if you're not flying a torpedo boat, that's fine. We don't want everybody to have every power. We want to create choices with these power sets.
I think just like with surgical strikes, though, it's giving some interesting alternative builds to sort of the cookie cutter.
Absolutely. So the next power we have is another weapons-focused one, but this one is an enhancement to yourself. When you use this power, all of your weapons for a short amount of time will place a debilitating effect on anybody that you hit with them. And yes, you can use Suppression Barrage at the same time as Fire at Will or Cannon Spread Volley. The debilitating effect that will land on any target that you hit reduces their outgoing damage, their flight speed, their turn rate, and their accuracy.
Whoa.
Debuff all the things.
This is basically the command ship. This is the guy that flies in, shoots everybody, and debilitates them all.
You know, this is great with respect to trying to unify gameplay with other players, because most of the time you fly in and you shoot and you're on TeamSpeak and maybe you kind of collaborate on what you shoot on at any given time. But these powers, I think, will introduce a new type of gameplay, not just for what they buff and what they debuff, but for what they do in a team setting.
I hope so.
Yeah, maybe it'll give science captains something to do.
Well, if we go along this school of thought, then perhaps the next skill tree will be for science and healers.
Well,
sky's the limit.
I would say don't sell yourself short, Cookie. Science are pretty powerful space wizards.
Unsung heroes, I like to say. I mean, if you go into a queue with nothing but tax, sure, things will blow up. But I'm willing to bet, you've probably seen this in some of the highest rated DPS players, they typically bring along at least one debuffer to make everybody hit less hard and then make their teammates do all that much better.
Yeah, when I play with the DPS league, they're usually organizing who's going to do what, and I'm like, what does that mean? I don't know what you're talking about, because I'm not attack, but they're like, oh, it's just tactical stuff. You don't have to do anything. Like,
Right,
okay.
it's like who's going to use
Just sit there and look pretty.
I know, it's like, oh, someday I'll have something to do.
Well, that's probably worth mentioning in regards to these hybrid bridge officers, is that if we do release a command ship that's got a command, a hybrid science/command seat, then you don't necessarily have to make the same kind of decision anymore. You don't have to choose between which science powers do I use, but now you have a whole set of new options that you can choose from, including all these command powers.
Yeah, I like that about the Scryer.
There's only one last bridge officer power here that I'm going to show you, and this one is the one that I was saying requires a nearby ally. So I've got my team dummy out here to demonstrate on. This is called subspace interception, and this power is basically used to save somebody else's butt, to pull their fat out of the fryer. So if team dummy over here takes a bunch of damage, then this power becomes available, and clicking it allows me to instantly warp to his side, make him untargetable.
Aww. So nice.
And it also renders a defense buff onto me. Basically a little payoff for me having given him saved his butt.
So
and the duration of that untargetable effect scales with his hit point level. So if he was down to like 1% hit points, the untargetable lasts longer, giving him a larger window in which to heal up or be healed by other teammates.
So
I like that effect on him too.
So you click on your friend and then click the...
No, that's the brilliant part of this power. At least, well, okay, I made it, so of course it's brilliant. But this power is auto-target. As soon as there is it cannot be activated until there is an eligible target. And that eligible target is any friend within 10K who is at 50% or lower hull capacity. But as soon as somebody meets that set of criteria, the power becomes available, and all you have to do is click it. You don't have to target them, you don't have to look at them, you don't have to do anything. As soon as that power lights up, you will be able to click it and be instantly teleported to their side and save their fat.
Wow, that's impressive, man.
What if you have, okay, you're in a team with someone you really like, and then you pug it with someone you don't know, and both the pug and the person you really like is both like dying, and you want to only help your friend and not the pug guy. So then what do you do?
Yeah, hypothetically, you guys, I totally heal pugs, but I mean, if you were a jerk, what would happen?
We don't support passive aggressive.
I totally do that.
I mean, I guess you could stay within 10K of your friend and not within 10K of everybody else. If you can manage that, then the payoff is you always get to save them.
But does it go towards whoever's worse off?
No, it goes towards whoever is closest and meets those criteria.
Okay. So even if you did target the friend, even if you did click it and target it, if there was somebody closer to you with less than 50%, it doesn't matter. The power is going to automatically go to the person closest to you.
Right.
Okay.
So that's why you need to get them to fly in phalanx with you.
Yeah, sure. It does make it a lot easier to use. You don't have to think about trying to find your friend in the melee and click on them, but it does eliminate that facet of choice.
I think it's a fair give and take, Cookie. You should be willing to heal everybody equally.
I mean, I do, but if I have the choice, I'm going to choose my friend.
Well, these are exciting powers.
And that's all we have for Command Bridge Officers. Is there any questions that may have come up?
No, I mean, personally, I think that these are exciting. I mean, I love the effects of them, definitely, and I love the buffs and the debuffs. I'm really looking forward to loading some of these up on my Bridge Officers. Maybe not all of them. They're probably not all for me, but I'm digging them. More so than the intelligence, I have to say.
Well, okay. I made those too, so I don't feel slighted.
These are growing on me. At first glance, I prefer Intel, but these are growing on me. I like seeing them in action a little more.
You will have the ability to add these Bridge Officer abilities to any existing Bridge Officer, as long as you have obtained 10 points in the Command Captain specialization. You'll earn the ability to create specialization qualifications, we call them. And once you have one of those, you can add the command specialization to any officer you like.
But you need to have a ship that has a command slot.
Yes, you must have a hybrid command seat on your ship in order to be able to use them in space. Not true on ground. No such restriction exists on ground.
And as of right now, there's only one ship.
Two. The Vodwar battlecruiser and the Samsar both have lieutenant hybrid command seats.
Okay, the Samsar does have it. The anniversary ship does have it. Okay.
Right.
Okay, are we ready to move into the command officer specialization then? The captain spec?
Yeah.
Now this is a new primary specialization. In order to have this active, you have to choose between it and intelligence officer.
Okay.
But you don't have to have this active to put the points in it. If you want to start buying things that keep Intelligence Officer active, that's fine. So I will go through most of these powers, try to give you just a quick once-over on all of them. And if they're unclear on how they could be used, or if I want to draw special attention to them, I'll do so. The Command Officer tree has a passive that, just like any tree has, it's a scaling passive. The more points you spend in the tree, the better bonus you get. For Command Officer, this is a bonus to your hull capacity and your hit points on ground. And I will show this a little bit of a reflection here on the video stream. This ship has 58,000 hit points base, and then when I activate the primary for Command Officer, with all 30 points spent, it goes up to 66,700.
Wow. You see, one of the other things I like about this is that it makes me want to get back in an escort.
Even though the concept of command we had very much aimed towards large command vessels, cruisers, maybe carriers, these skills are totally useful in escorts. Mm-hmm. So let's start going through them. We have a ground cluster here in Tier 1 to start off with. It starts with Forward March, which increases the sprint speed of your entire team. And if you have multiple command officers on that team and they all have Forward March, the bonuses stack.
Oh, nice.
So your entire team can earn up to a total of 25% increased run speed if everybody has Forward March. Nice. Underneath that ability, we have Communal Targeting, which increases the exposed chance for your entire team, and again, stacks. We have an increase to your exposed duration using the Lingering Expose ability, and again, stacks. All of these that mention stacking, we will tell you explicitly the stack limit. 9 times out of 10, I don't think there's any exception actually to this rule that it stacks up to an entire team of 5 commanders.
Cool.
So we don't get the too many cooks effect. I like that.
Right. Nobody's choices get diminished by this. We have Peripheral Coordination that will increase the flanking increase your resistance to damage done from your flank, or in other words, reduce damage on your flank for your entire team. And then we have True Aim that increases the exploit damage done by your entire team. So this entire cluster is built around you as a commander. The concept is that you're able to coordinate your peers and your subordinates to just perform better in ways that are hard to tell at a glance. You know, we didn't want to make this as boring as just increase your damage resistance. This is really the kind of tactical coordination we were getting at with the whole command concept. And we have a similar cluster in space, except this actually introduces a new mechanic to space combat. The Tier 1 space skill is called Expose Weakness. And what this does, once you have it, is that any energy weapon that you fire to a target has a chance to expose that target, just like on ground. And then torpedoes that you fire will exploit those targets, dealing additional kinetic damage.
Oh, wow.
Well, rather, ignoring a portion of their kinetic damage resistance. I am going to try and get this effect to fire on this test dummy here to actually illustrate it. Oh, okay, so we have an example of an exposed target here. It looks just like the ground exposed, should be very very familiar to anybody that's played the game up to the point of being able to unlock specializations. But if you hit any target that has that exposed effect on them with a torpedo, they will do additional damage.
That little arrow things we're seeing?
That is Achilles' heel, which I'll get to in a minute.
Okay.
It's a lower tier ability. Exposed weakness can be improved, so you improve your chances of exposing the targets, and then you can also use violent detonation to increase the actual amount of kinetic damage resistance that is ignored by your exploits. There has been some questions on the forums about what exactly does it mean when it ignores damage resistance. Another way of reflecting that is armor penetration, basically. When this torpedo hits its target, if the target is exposed, it treats it as if it had negative 100 kinetic damage resistance. That's just another way of reflecting the mechanic.
So some of these are clickable and some of them are not clickable?
All of these are passive effects. They are either always on or triggered by specific events. They're, the only exception to that is down here in Tier 5. Just like in the intelligence spec, the Tier 5 abilities were clickable. Same goes here. Okay, moving on to Tier 2, which starts with the power Superfluous Emitters. I've heard that a lot of people like saying
Superfluous Emitters.
This works on both ground and space, and what it does is it gives you, the owner of this ability, an extra damage bonus for every one of your teammates that is above 95% health or hull capacity. So if you'll notice right now I'm on a team with Team Dummy over here, and since he's at full health, I do have 1 stack of
Superfluous Emitters.
It's a little laggy just on a local client. Should work fine on live. Which is giving me a damage bonus of 2% extra damage. Now, this ability is purposefully intended to facilitate tanking, to encourage tanking. If you have 1 person on the team that is able to draw aggro and take all of the damage, that means 4 other people on the team are going to probably be at full health or very near. Meaning that in that case, anybody that has this
Superfluous Emitters
ability on that team will be getting an extra 8% damage bonus.
Wow, so that actually rewards you for doing good.
Right.
Where I'm used to the opposite. I'm used to the
Failing
tactical
forward.
captains,
Go down fighting.
Yeah.
This whole command set, the command specialization and the command bridge officers, we do want to encourage you to play well with others. Hopefully you'll still get a benefit if you choose not to play with other players, but if you do so and you do well and you play coordinated, we think you'll get an even larger payoff from these power sets.
You know, it's interesting because I remember Chris Dodds talking about when designing the new STFs, when designing the new Qs, how the goal was to get players to start playing more together. So there seems to be a shift over at Cryptic about trying to pull players together, trying to get them to collaborate, get on a VoIP service like TeamSpeak or whatnot, and have them work together in some way.
Well, it is an MMO, and anything that we can do to encourage players to actually participate in the MMO part of that is good for the life of the game, for the community, for everything.
I can just hear people like Dr. Robert Hurt very sad that these new systems are being introduced, and which can sometimes affect the success of a pug. But you know, I'm a fan of it. You know, I've always been harping for this type of team collaboration because you're right, it is an MMO, so I like it. I dig it.
I do too. Now, underneath Superfluous Emitters, we have a few different abilities. Some, basically, we have a ground and a space version of Energy Signature Flux and Life Sign Flux. Those are the space and ground versions of the same thing. You get an extra defense or dodge bonus whenever you receive a shield healing. So again, this encourages others to spread out their healing, and it rewards players who team up with people who pay attention to their allies. And then we also have Restoration Harmonics and Restoration Synergy, which are the space and ground versions of a team-wide healing received buff, which again can stack with multiple members of the team. So the more command officers you have with Restoration Synergy, the more powerful everybody's heals are on that team. Now, Tier 3 is where we get into the power that you saw on the earlier when I was showing off the expose effects. This is called Achilles Heel, and this is an effect that is it is always on until it is used. This will affect your next critical strike to do an additional. Will apply an additional debuff to the target that makes their damage resistance go down.
I love that icon. That's great.
So there's Achilles Heel 1, 2, 3. At the full 3 that I have here is what is reflected in the tooltips that you guys are seeing in the video. Is a minus 25%, or sorry, minus 25 all damage resistance rating for 10 seconds every time you crit. So it's guaranteed the next time you crit, if you see this icon active on your bar, you will hit the target. So there I crit, and you can see the effect on the ship over there. Now, the downward arrows that you're seeing there are this other ability which attaches to Achilles' heel called Debilitating Weakness. Debilitating Weakness basically causes your Achilles' heel to also reduce the damage output of the target that you hit with this effect. So by investing in this entire cluster, you basically get this additional effect on every crit. Not every crit, sorry, it takes a while to refresh. Achilles' heel will refresh every 30 seconds. So a maximum of once per 30 seconds, every time you critically hit, you will get this debilitating effect that reduces both the damage resistance and the outgoing damage of any target that you strike with that. And while that is on the surface a very selfish, a very solo sort of debuff, because it's automatically applied to a critical hit, both of those effects are very beneficial to your team.
For sure, anything that lowers damage resistance. I mean, that's why everyone loves attack pattern beta, right?
And reduces damage outgoing as well.
Yep.
So even if you're not the tank, if you're not the one being shot at, this is still an effect that can benefit somebody on your team. Now, the Tier 3 ground cluster is actually one that I find the most entertaining. These were very fun to make. Resilient Expose is what starts this cluster. It allows any successful exploit attack that you make on the ground. So you have a target that's already exposed, and you hit them with an exploit attack, you get the damage bonus. If you have this ability, you also have a chance to instantly refresh the expose effect instead of consuming it.
Yeah, this was another one of my favorite ones when the blog was published.
Yeah, eliminating cooldowns are great.
Not just cooldowns, but like let's say you're on a team with one other person. I know, Cookie, you said that you have a friend that you play with sometimes. Let's say one of you managed to expose a target, but you're both using sniper rifles, and one of you gets the shot off just as the other one's lining up the sniper shot. Well, the second one usually wouldn't allow their exploit attack of that sniper shot to actually deal extra damage. But if you guys were using this Resilient Expose, there's a fairly decent chance that the one that fires the sniper shot first doesn't consume the effect, but instead refreshes it, allowing that second person to get their exploit attack in as well.
Cool.
Very nasty for some of the ground boss fights, I think.
Yes, this will probably kill many large dinosaurs. And then we also have Under the Radar. So once you've invested in Resilient Expose, you have the chance to increase your own expose chance whenever you're behind an enemy. So again, team-oriented, because getting behind an enemy is really something you can only do if you're coordinating with somebody else, or your bridge officers. But now by investing in Under the Radar, anytime you are behind a target, you have a greatly increased chance of applying an expose effect, which you can then have a Resilient Expose if you're using the other stuff in the tree. And then to continue to play on the Expose Exploit theme, we have Victory Cry, which I think is probably my favorite ability in this whole tree. Anytime anybody on your team nearby, actually any nearby ally, this can happen on battle zones as well, they don't have to be on your team. Anytime they successfully vaporize an enemy, everybody nearby gets a heal.
Oh.
I think I need that for my Klingon.
That's cool.
Now the tooltip you guys are probably seeing on the videos is a space value, so that's what it looks. 6,000 hit points healed. That's quite a lot.
Finally, I'll be able to survive those falls.
It is a fairly meaty heal, even on the ground. Now, if you have multiple command officers with Victory Cry, everybody nearby will get multiple heals.
Cool. Nice.
And if those command officers also have Restoration Synergy, everybody on that team also gets a bonus to healing received. So you see how it all goes together.
So elegant, almost as if it was designed that way.
Almost as if. And finally we get into the Tier 4, the bottom of the tree, which starts off with a power that I've heard a lot of people talking about, Extrovert. This seems to be a favorite of a lot of people that have been reading through the powers available to them. Extrovert gives you, the owner of this tree, an additional 2.5% specialization XP and Starship Mastery XP per player on your team, up to a 10% max. Originally, there was some confusion I saw on our forums about this giving this bonus to everybody on the team, but in order to receive this bonus, you have to actually have invested this far down in the command tree.
So for this might behoove some folks to get to Tier 4 in command early in their general specialization if they haven't already maxed out the other trees.
Potentially. I mean, you probably want to weigh your other options, make sure everything in the higher tiers is also something you want to get. I hope it is. Hope you don't hate everything I just made.
It's terrible.
But you're right. Anything that, it's kind of like the dilithium mine sort of thing. Any new fleet that is formed now should probably consider investing in the dilithium mine first, because it gives discounts on the rest of the holdings. Yeah, this is a similar sort of situation.
And it's logical for a second tree reward because it'll help people catch up.
Right.
Following extrovert, we have the only 2 click powers in the tree, and these are basically the same effect, but one is for space and one is for ground. The space power boost morale, will affect you and every member of your team, and gives you ongoing removal of all debuffs and all control effects for 4 seconds, basically making you immune to anybody telling you what to do. So, as you see, I have activated here, and Team Dummy also gets the effects over here. Ranking this up gives you a shorter cooldown on it. It starts at 90 seconds and then becomes 60. And then there is also Revitalize, which does the same in ground combat. And that's it for the command specialization. Any questions about anything in here?
Until I get to play them, I'm not gonna. Once I play them, I'll have some questions.
No, I think that this is a really nice recap. I think that this is a great introduction for players who are interested in seeing the powers in action, and getting an understanding of what they can expect when they make the purchase or slot it into their bridge officer for some space combat. So, I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I think that some of these are certainly appealing to me. The specialization tree, I never invested anything in intelligence. So because I was kind of waiting for what the second tree was going to be, and I'm glad I did save some points for this. If not for anything,
well, it
for
is
the
probably
tier
worth
4.
Noting that if somebody went out and earned all the previous ones and spent them all and hit the cap, we raised the cap. So come on back and earn more.
Go to Argala. What? No.
Oh, come on now.
Anywhere but Argala, really.
Garen is.
If you play anything but Argala, you make me a lot happier. Well, and the specialization system is something we plan to continue to expand on for some time to come. You guys are honestly still only seeing part of the plan that we created months before Delta Rising. We knew that we were aiming for something that was larger than what we could release with Delta Rising, so we made sure that we laid a good, solid groundwork that we could expand into a system that we actually wanted. So technically, even though this is already a fairly robust system, it is in some ways incomplete to our original goals, our original design philosophy and everything.
Let me ask you something, Jeremy. Al Rivera, several months ago, I remember in an interview, he brought up the idea of replacing the skills, the captain skills, with something like this, something like in a traditional MMO, where as you level, you get a power. What are your thoughts on something like that in terms of what is presently there now, where you have to, notch up in each skill and, maybe only give 6 notches versus 9? And is the specialization tree something that is a hint at what might happen to the skill system down the road?
I think I can safely say that we hope so. There have been many talks internally about improving, simplifying, making the skill system, the one that you experience as you level up in STO, something that doesn't doesn't confuse players, doesn't drive them away from the game, and something that feels viscerally more satisfying than putting one more pip into one more power with another technobabble name that you might not understand what effect it actually has.
Yes.
So yes, the talent trees, the specialization trees that we have here, the command officer, intelligence, pilot, commando, these are a good kind of outline for the kind of stuff that we would probably like to do with the skill system. But to be honest, it would also have its own unique aspects.
Interesting.
But to answer another part of your question, we do understand the plight of our existing system. We've had a long time on Star Trek now. The game is 5 years old, and then another year in development prior to that, we have had plenty of time to look at what we've done and figure out what works and what doesn't. And as we get the time, we definitely want to go back and fix or tune or improve the things that we've decided don't work or don't work up to our standards. And as our mission content probably reflects, our standards have risen over the years. So that means that things that might have flown at launch just don't anymore.
I mean, the team itself has doubled. I mean, I remember Aloe Vera telling stories about how it was, a team of 5 or 6, and now, you have a whole wing to Cryptic Studios there.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's another basic aspect of time as well. I mean, it has been 5 years, 6 since the project started, 6 and change. And developers are just like any other human. We didn't come into this project knowing everything. We've learned a lot over the years. And every one of us has gotten better at our jobs and better at doing things well and understanding what works and what doesn't in any game. We've also played other games that have come out over the years and seen what other developers have done, what works for them and what didn't work for them. So it's just, like I said, another basic aspect of time. As time goes by, everybody learns and everybody adapts, and then we figure out what was not great, and then we put together plans to make it great.
Cool.
You sure are making big strides.
That's true. I think as I had spent some time with people in the DPS League, I began to understand the concern that someone like Aloe Vera had about the existing skill tree, because you have items in the game that everybody works for, and they get it because it boosts a particular skill. And as a novice player looking at the skill tree, you would never imagine that you would never think that you would need to invest points into something like that. And so as I was learning how to improve my own DPS, I was also learning about, man, I kind of wish this was like a traditional MMO, where as you level, you earn a power, and your items are the buff, and they don't necessarily correlate so much in deep seated math in terms of, and theory crafting for improving your gameplay and game style or DPS. So I'm actually looking forward and enjoying the direction that the specialization tree is going, and I'm hoping that it is going to be it's a bit of a crystal ball into the future as to what changes might come to how players progress in the game.
Absolutely. Now, I should probably point out that even though we've been in talks internally about revamping the skill system, it's not yet on our schedule.
Right.
We don't know yet what we want to do, so it's not easy to say how much time it's going to take or where we can fit it in.
Jeremy, I want to thank you again for joining us here on Priority One Podcast. It's always great having you. It's a fantastic look into what players can expect with the new features that I know you work tirelessly to produce. So thank you so much.
Thanks again for having me.
Transfer complete.